Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Regina Yao, the founder and president of the Pixel Project, and I am moderating the third YouTube session of the 11th annual fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 17 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. And we'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. And you can find out more about the Pixel Project by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. And we have a very special guest today, and I'm putting her on screen. We have a very special guest today. Here we go. Hang on. Sorry, everyone. Tech issues. Okay, so we have a very special guest today. We're having a live discussion and Q&A session with the award-winning horror author, Rachel Harrison. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And Rachel is the USA Today best-selling author of So Thirsty, Black Sheep, Such Sharp Teeth, Cackle, and The Return, which was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in a First Novel. Her short fiction has appeared in Guernica, Electric Literature's recommended reading, as an Audible original, and in her debut story collection, Bad Dolls. And Rachel has also generously donated 3 types of exclusive and unique goodies to the stash of author goodies we have up as thank you free treats for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Out fundraising page. So the first one is Rachel's So Thirsty bundle, and it has the hardcover version of edition of So Thirsty. It's signed and personalized by Rachel with some annotations. It has a greeting card from Culture Flock and also 3 vinyl stickers from Culture Flock. And this one's just gone. The moment we posted it, Rachel, someone just snapped it up and made the donation. But there are 2 more goodies from you. Rachel will write a poem for you, and basically, Rachel will compose and handwrite a poem on the topic of the donor's choice. The topic could be inspired by something in the donor's own life or from one of Rachel's works. And Rachel will sign the poem and mail it directly to the donor or the recipient of the donor's choice. So let's say you have a friend who's a horror aficionado and they have a birthday coming up. This is actually a really cool gift to get them, and your donation will go straight to helping women and girls. And the third goodie is Rachel will have a 30-minute Zoom call with you, and she'll be happy to chat about the art and craft of writing, publishing, and books with you or your book club or your writing group for 30 minutes at a date and time that suits you both. At present, we have raised $1,675 towards our $5,000 goal so far. So please give generously before the fundraiser ends in October 2025. And all funds go towards our work to end violence against women. And if you're watching this session on YouTube right now, you will be able to ask Rachel questions live. Just make sure you're logged into your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen. And Xiaoqin, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read aloud to Rachel to answer. And we'll put your questions on screen as well, everybody. And now over to Rachel. Welcome to Read for Pixels again. What will you be reading for us today?
So I'm going to be reading from Play Nice, which is my new novel. It is out this Tuesday, the 9th. It is about a young woman named Cleo who has been estranged from her mother for a very long time, and her mother unexpectedly passes away, and it causes some tension in Cleo's family because Cleo's parents divorced when Cleo and her sisters were young, and the divorce was very contentious, and her mother moved into a house that she claimed was possessed by a demon. And Cleo's father basically said, well, she's crazy. Her mother lost custody, and now as an adult, Cleo is starting to question if that is true or not, and because she inherits the house and starts spending time there, and the demon might be real after all. So the section I'm going to be reading is actually a book within the book, because Cleo's mother wrote an Amityville horror style book about her time in this possessed house and left it for Cleo. So it's this is by Cleo's mother, Alexandra. It's about halfway through the book, and there are little annotations that Cleo's mother left in this copy. So I'll be reading those asides as well. Hopefully that was coherent. Again, the book comes out Tuesday, so I'm a little tired. I've been burning the midnight oil. Okay, so at this point, Cleo's mother, Alexandra, has called a priest to the house to help with her demon problem. Father Bernard arrived the next morning before I could get the girls to school. LD and Cece were at the kitchen table eating oatmeal when the doorbell rang. They perked up, curious. By the way, LD and Cece are code names, fictional names that Alexandra used to not name her actual daughters in the book. So Cece is Cleo. LD and Cece were at the kitchen table eating oatmeal when the doorbell rang. They perked up, curious. This is my visitor and my personal business, I told them. Nobody likes a busybody. What's a busybody? Elle asked me. I suspect she's the one who told your father. A gossip. I went down and answered the door. Father Bernard was an old man, well into his 70s. He was completely bald, but had long, dark, bristly eyebrows, like black widows glued to his face. Like Father John, he was dressed in all black, except for the white of his clerical collar. Unlike Father John, he came without a hat, and without manners. Good morning, Father, I said. He grunted. Miss Barnes. Alexandra, please, come in, I said. Our call the night before had been short. He didn't provide details other than he'd spoken to Father John about the house and that he would come by in the morning. He crossed himself before coming inside. He winced the second he stepped into the foyer, then sniffed the air, 2 exaggerated inhales, crinkling his nose. It was incredibly, unabashedly rude. Sulfur. Excrement. Excuse me? He shook his head. I'm not welcome here. The presence is making itself known, trying to repel me. It's powerful. I was shocked to receive such immediate validation. The presence? I asked. He ignored me, waving a hand as if I were a gnat. He looked past me, down the stairs, then up the stairs, then down the stairs, as if debating which way to go, a sort of purgatory there on the landing. He clutched a Bible to his chest and started upstairs. My girls, I whispered, following at his heels. They don't know. Very well, he said. When we reached the top of the stairs, we found the girls gathered around the dining table. They'd moved their chairs closer and were glowering at us like a pack of wolves. Hello there, Father Bernard said, his tone artificially cheery. I was grateful he wasn't as brash with the girls as he was with me, but knew they would be able to see right through him. I'd taught them to be skeptical of strangers, done what I could to nurture their intuition. So often we're trained to ignore our intuition, that it's impolite or irrational to be anything but sweet and nice, arms open, ankles crossed. I was scolded by my parents, by teachers, by friends, by ex-lovers, by your father. I was told so many times that my intuition was wrong, when it was right, that I didn't know how to trust myself anymore. Men love a beautiful fool, weak men rather. I didn't want you girls to suffer the way that I did. Sure enough, they narrowed their eyes at him. Cece, in particular, was never afraid of being perceived as ill-mannered. Who are you? I'm Father Bernard, he said. I'm here for a quick visit and to see your house. Cece made a face. Like that other guy? Father John, yes, he's a friend of mine. He had a pretty bad time, she said, and returned to her breakfast. Elle and Dee said nothing. They exchanged looks, then got up and went to their room. Cece stayed at the table, occasionally poking at her oatmeal while doodling on a notepad. "It's better if I explore the house alone," Father Bernard said, "without your influence." "Influence?" I asked. He waved me off again and started to wander around, muttering prayers to himself. I sat beside Cece at the dining table with my coffee, now gone cold. Father Bernard moved through the house. He was slow, methodical, with his Bible and his prayers and a vial of holy water. Cece drew. I finished my cold coffee. Elle emerged from her room. "We're going to be late to school." "You can be late," I told her. What could I do? She huffed, clenching her jaw, her fists, and stormed back into her room, slamming the door. I looked over at Cece. She was drawing a picture of the house. "That's very good," I told her, because it was. Not just good for a 7-year-old. She was a prodigy, a very talented artist. "Thanks," she said. "I know." There was a crash downstairs. I gasped, but Cece was unfazed. She raised her eyebrows, shrugged. "Father Bernard?" I called, as I got up and went over to the stairs. He was coming up to the landing, patting his head with a handkerchief. "Alexandra, I need to speak with you," he said sternly. "Outside, now, please." "I'll be back," I told Cece. "Ooh, you're in trouble," she sing-songed, grinning at me. I met Father Bernard outside. He paced on the front pathway. It was a hot, sticky day, and possibly humid. He was drenched in sweat. "I have known Father John for a long, long time. We were altar boys together, before you were even a twinkle in your father's eye." An awful expression in general, but especially coming from the mouth of a priest, this priest in particular. When I received the call from him, I knew the matter at hand must be urgent. You see, all priests are aware of and educated on the subject of occult phenomenon, but some are specialists in dealing with such matters. I am one of such specialists, which is why John reached out to me. He relayed his concern of a possible infestation, diabolical interference. "I'm sorry, what does that mean?" He looked at me with a solemn expression. "I am sorry to inform you. I believe there is an entity living in your house, and I believe it may be demonic." I never could have anticipated what would come next. It was the single most terrifying moment of my life up until that point. It was also the most liberating. Here was someone who was substantiating my fear, confirming what I had known all along. There was evil lurking inside my home. "What do I do?" I asked him, practically on my knees pleading. It is very rare, though not impossible, for such an entity to inhabit a home. Possession of places and things are often means to an end for such entities. It is their ultimate desire to possess the flesh, a body, a mind, a person. This is why I believe you and your daughters may be at risk. But for my own integrity, I will need to be sure before I perform the rites of exorcism on your home. It is my recommendation that we have an outside investigative research team confirm that this is in fact a demon we are dealing with and not, say, a ghost or a poltergeist. I have some names. In the meantime, I suggest you take some precautions." "Like what?" "Do not underestimate the power of prayer, the power of God. Are your daughters baptized?" I'm going to leave it there. So it's from The Book Within a Book, Play Nice.
And Play Nice is coming out on Tuesday, you said?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Everyone go get Play Nice when it comes out. And you can get it from all your favorite booksellers, right? And all your preferred booksellers, your indie bookshops and all. And go get it. And speaking of books, I'm just going to put a comment from one of our viewers on screen. So my name is Kara, says, just started Play Nice this evening, arrived from BOTM today. I love the book cover and BOTM edition is so pretty.
Yes, I am so excited to be a book of the month. I don't know what they call them, a selection. But yeah, and it's unreal, and it's really exciting to see the book out there kind of early. It feels like it's already out. I keep forgetting that it's not. Thank you for picking it up. I appreciate it.
Okay, so let's get started with this evening's discussion. So All of your books and stories feature memorable female narrators, protagonists, and supporting characters, ranging from the twin sisters Rory and Scarlett Morris in Such Sharp Teeth, to besties Sloane and Naomi in So Thirsty, to Annie and Sophie in Cackle. So, who or what inspired you to create your female characters? And what I'm curious about is you seem to be a rarity in that you always have a pair of female characters. So, what inspired you to create them?
So I think it's interesting. I never really considered anything else. I think, I mean, write what you know is questionable advice, but I write to explore how I feel about the world and how I experience things and how I like questions that I have about what it is to be alive. And um, I kind of come, we all have, you know, our unique experiences. We all move through the world, as ourselves. And I think I can only explore my art through my own experiences. And um, so all of my characters are women because I'm a woman and that's how I've experienced the world. And my relationships with other women, my female, like my friendships with my girlfriends, are so profound and important to me. And I think underrepresented in fiction. And I think sister relationships are also really fascinating and often really fraught. Um, and so it wasn't really something that it came naturally to me. It wasn't an intentional thing where I'm like, I'm going to um, only write about women. It was just really like how writing is how I express myself and how I kind of like work out um, my experiences. And so it kind of came naturally to me and comes naturally. And I'll never stop writing about um, friendships and women and women telling women's stories.
Yeah, and this actually ties into our next question because as I said just now, this particular aspect of your book really stands out in a great way because positive depictions of female friendships and sisterhood isn't usually at the forefront of horror books. In fact, I think one of the best things about your books is that and about is the sisterhood in your books because it shows how the sisterhood, the French, being sisters or friends helps the characters blossom and come into their own. And it's not just one character, it's like a mutual thing. Both characters develop in relation to their sisterhood or their friendship with each other. So, what are the challenges of writing about female friendships and sisterhood in the horror genre, and why do you think positive takes on female friendship and sisterhood is still not very common in horror?
I think because the horror genre has been dominated by men for so long that it's I think that's part of it. And I think publishing in the past has maybe been skeptical that there is a place for women's stories and stories about friendship and sisters in horror that would sell, that people want to read. Um, so, I mean, when I think about like The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, like Eleanor, um, and it's Theodora, right? Sorry, again, mush brain.
Eleanor and Theodora,
Yeah,
yeah.
they have a
Eleanor,
that's a
yeah.
good friendship. I like that relationship. So it has existed, but I think there there needed to be open-minded publishers who would say like women and horror readers want this and like we believe in it. Um, publish it. And then I think there just needed to be, I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then also to the horror genre now has so many different voices in it. And I think telling different stories. And because of that, it's the more we prove that this genre has a wide readership and it's not just, one type of story for one type of reader, the more like diversity of stories that we're going to have. So I think it's all these things at once that have made it conducive for my work to get on the shelves.
Yeah, and you mentioned Shirley Jackson and Eleanor and Theodora, and I think it's kind of ironic because that book was published a long time ago, and it's considered such a classic in the horror genre, and yet publishers did not seem to get the memo about, yeah, it can sell, yeah, it can become a classic, yeah, it's not a death sentence to have a female protagonist or two in a book. In fact, it can be the driving force of a story, and you can tell different stories. And not everybody wants to read the same type of tropes and stuff over and over again. And speaking of tropes and stereotypes, it seems that horror as a genre in both modern and folk storytelling has traditionally not been kind to female figures and characters, especially in terms of stereotypes and tropes. And women are portrayed as everything from murderers like Lizzie Borden and Dracula's handmaidens to victims. Well, countless horror movies can attest to that. How do you work around or subvert such stereotypes to create your female characters who have agency in dealing with the horrors around her, including situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women?
Again, I think it comes back to sort of grounding my stories in reality. I write to explore how I feel about the world and not necessarily like my specific experience, but like more broadly emotions about certain issues. And I think because of that, I am trying to write characters who feel authentic and feel like somebody that I would know and who have pieces of me and have like pieces of friends and I need all of my characters to feel real. And I think voice is so important. I write close first person. So I really need to connect with a voice to write a story, to like get past the first page. And if I'm doing that, I'm usually pretty confident in who this person is and I can feel the depth and I know them in my mind. And I think that's how I combat stereotypes, is just writing these characters who feel real and authentic and who I believe. And the more I do that, the more like people will connect with them, and the more like I'm kind of like just letting like be the change you want to see in the genre. And so like, and I see work like, I think about Mayfly by CJ Lead. And that character, Maeve, is like complicated, vicious character, and there's a line in it, and I wish I had written it down, but it's something like, women don't need a reason to be bad. And I think there's something really empowering about that. And I think it's just being, the more female characters we have who are written by women, that aren't just getting killed and have agency, I think it enriches the genre. And the more we do that, the more those stereotypes become antiquated. And I think just readers leave them in the past.
Yeah, because as you said, you write them as real and authentic, as real as possible. And when you write characters that are real, they have flaws, right? And they're flawed in very human ways and these flaws make them very relatable to many female readers, including myself. And I was wondering, when you write, do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural expectations to make your female characters relatable and likable? And the reason why we're asking this question is because we've had other female Read for Pixels authors in the past talk about how they receive pushback from fans when they write female characters that fans just feel aren't likable enough. Have you ever found that when when you go on book signings or if anyone gives you feedback on your books?
Oh gosh, yeah. I remember, so when The Return was my first novel, and I remember getting tagged in a review like early on that was like, all of these, I hated all these characters, they're all awful people, and I was just like, like I was shocked because the way that the reviewer was talking about them, I was like, other than one of them, they didn't do anything. I mean, they were just like women in their 20s. Like, I just was shocked by the strong reaction to it. And I do think women are held to a higher standard, and there's certain expectations for how they behave. And it kind of surprised me that no matter, because usually in my stories, there's like, I call them like my sad sack protagonists, like Annie and Cackle, who's starting out in like a really sad place. Or I have a character like Rory and Vesper, who start off like confident, and kind of their arc is me breaking them down and them having to come back up. But it didn't matter what, like, the characters were always described as unlikable or always described as like deeply flawed. And it was interesting because, I didn't see male characters being described that way, even ones who were like actually doing bad things. And so, like, Play Nice, my book that's out on Tuesday, I was like, you know what? This is my 6th book, and I'm kind of like, I've seen this conversation and I'm kind of pushing back against it. So my protagonist in Play Nice, Cleo, is like all of the traits that women are not allowed to be. She's extremely confident. She's selfish. She is conceited. She is promiscuous. She like puts herself first. Like all of these things that I think, in in a patriarchal society, like, we are all trained to bristle against. And so I created this character to sort of hopefully have this conversation about, okay, it's fine if you don't relate to a character or like them necessarily, but I want to challenge people to have empathy for characters who they don't like. And if they don't like a character, I want to ask them why. Like, I want to challenge them to say, like, okay, you didn't like Cleo. Why didn't you like her? Is it because she was selfish? Well, there's a line in the book that talks about why, like, it's a trick that, like, we are trained to think that selfish women are bad, but like selfish men are savvy. And so I'm kind of trying to like deconstruct, like, why are we so quick to call female characters unlikable, and like, what are the traits that we find unlikable, and who does it benefit in our society that, women who are super confident or want more from themselves, or, not soft and gentle, and who are bratty, like, why are we trained to think that that's a bad thing? And so that was kind of, this was very, the process of writing Play Nice is sort of cathartic for me, of just, having this written 5 books prior, and like sort of just taking all that feedback on the chin and just sort of being like, okay, it's fine if you don't connect with the character. And I think that it is fine if you don't connect with the character or relate to them or want to be their friend. But I think likable and a character shouldn't have to be likable for you to have empathy for them. So that's my whole. You actually that I love that question.
Yeah, characters should be compelling and interesting. They
Yes.
should hook our interest and keep us reading. They don't necessarily have to be likable. I mean, how many times have we talked about, especially with TV series, right? She's the character or he's the character we all love to hate. The whole love to hate thing. So I don't know why they don't give so many readers, I feel, don't extend this grace to characters in a book. They will do for a TV character, I noticed, but not for characters in a book. And it's just kind of strange because it's just two different mediums for storytelling.
Yeah.
We have some comments from the audience. So my name is Cara says, yes, I love an unlikable and messy woman. It definitely makes the characters more relatable.
Yeah.
She continues saying, the more comments and reviews I see like that, like the one that you mentioned, the more I know I'm gonna like it. And Cara has a question. What were the most formative pieces of horror media for you? Love pink horror and the intersection of female rage stories and horror.
So it's interesting because I was late to I am scared of everything. So when I was young, I thought that I didn't like horror because I saw the Blair Witch Project when I was 10 or 11 and I was terrified for months. And so I can kind of look back and the Haunted Mansion at Disney World, that was an experience that was very poignant and I would have nightmares about, and Blair Witch. And then when I was in college, I think the most aha moment I had that I actually like the genre, my roommate was a huge horror fan and she put on it's a Spanish film, it's called The Orphanage, and I was so terrified. I had a panic attack halfway through watching this movie because it scared me so much. And then I woke up the next day and was like, I need to know what happens. I need to know the end of the story. And it was the first time that I kind of understood that the purpose of horror isn't just to scare us, that horror can tell a really powerful story, and the fear can intensify those other feelings and make it more powerful. And so I think The Orphanage was sort of when I really started to connect with horror on a deeper level. But in terms of female rage stories, I love Jennifer's Body, I love Ginger Snaps, I love Midsummer. And then in terms of books, I love C.J. Leeds' work, I love Alexis Henderson's work, Liz Caron, Aaron E. Adams, in terms of some female rage in there. Those are some recent favorites.
Okay, so let's pivot to talk about male characters. So you have a range of male characters in your books, from Joel, the cheating husband of Sloane Parker in So Thirsty, to Ian in Such Sharp Teeth, who has carried a torch for Rory Morris since high school. So do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways that horror writers can break away from the toxic tropes that promote dysfunctional masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to show nuance in male characters too. The books that I write are not about men, but I love men. Men are part of my life. I think it's important to show male characters who are good and who have nuance and who are complex and who aren't just, I think it would dilute my message my books are inherently feminist. It would dilute my message if all of the men in my book were evil, because I think it's a harmful idea from people who are afraid of feminism because they think it's man-hating, and it's not.
No, it's not. We want better. We want better for everybody. We don't.
Exactly.
The patriarchy is just harming everybody at this point.
Exactly. And so I never want my books to feel to perpetuate that harmful idea that feminism is man-hating. So it's very important to me to write male characters who kind of, even ones who are like not great, I still want them to feel real. And like I want every character in my book to feel real and to have good qualities and bad qualities. And I don't really, and I kind of get in trouble with my editor on this point, because she's always like, you need a villain. And I'm like, no one's a villain. Like, they're all somewhere between good and evil. Like I think most people fall somewhere in the middle on the spectrum. Like,
I always thought that if the villain, I mean, I'm putting it in quotation marks, in your books are whatever problem that they are all dealing with. It's not necessarily a person, but it's that problem that's the sticking point, right?
yes, yeah. It's the adversary is not a person. It's usually something a little bit more mercurial, or it's the situation they're in, or society, or whatever.
Vampirism is like lycanthropy, I think.
Yes, yes.
It's one of that, and that's a lot trickier to deal with than dealing with people, I guess.
Yes. And I think there are bad people in some of my books, but it's a spectrum, I think. It depends on the story. And I think with Such Sharp Teeth, for an example, you have Ian, who is like a great guy, who is just all around cinnamon roll, wonderful guy. And then you have Dave, who's only mentioned in memory, who is an awful guy, who is the worst. And so I think it's important to have that balance, and to not just have it feel like, well, all the women in my books are good and all the men are bad. Because again, I think that's a harmful notion of feminism. And so it's important for me to just nuance across the board, and to, when I handle any subject matter that is a little bit heavier, to handle it with care, and not just have it feel just like, oh, this is a bad guy, and it's, cartoonish, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about horror as a genre. So horror is often seen as a genre that reflects and addresses the deepest fears of culture and society. For example, much has been made about how zombie movies are a social commentary on everything from consumerism to politics. We could say that the genre also reflects deep-seated misogyny and sexism of the patriarchy, in that horror stories commonly feature some sort of violence against women. So rape, incest, domestic violence, and other forms of violence against women are very common in horror, and consent is often absent. In fact, the violation of women's boundaries can be said to be a convenient device for inducing and heightening feelings of dread and terror in the reader or viewer. Do you think that consent is an issue that writers in the genre have started tackling successfully in recent years? And what can horror authors do to include consent in their stories when they're including violence against women?
I think it's vital to include consent in a way that feels natural. And it's inherently difficult when you are telling stories about violence. And again, horror tends to be a violent genre. So like if you have a slasher, the slasher is not going to ask for consent to kill you. But like for me, in all of my books, like if I have a romantic subplot, there's always, no one is like kissing without consent. Like there's always a question. There's always a can I, there's always a moment where there's that consent. And so I think it's balancing out in the moments that are grounded in, if you're writing a supernatural story, the moments that are grounded in reality, I think it's important to infuse consent. And in the moments that are like, again, the werewolf is not going to ask permission to bite you. And I mean, it's a metaphor, so there's that. But I think that finding that balance is important, and including it where it makes sense to the story is important. And I think that we can find places to do that. And just because it is a violent genre, just because it is horror, doesn't mean that that's not an excuse to just ignore the little ways that we can. There's always an opportunity to infuse some sort of detail that has consent in it, just to remind our readers that it's not absent. I think it's important.
So that leads us to our next question. So I don't know if you heard about the Staunch Prize, which goes to the thriller in which no woman is beaten, stalked, sexually exploited, raped, or murdered, and it was launched to much debate I think a handful of years ago. And the winner was announced, and their book showed that it's possible to write an excellent thriller without violence against women. Do you think such a prize might work for the horror genre? And if it is possible to write horror without violence against women?
I think it is. It's totally possible to do that. Yeah, there's no reason why why you can't write a story about, like, you know, a bachelor party that goes south without any women in it. Like, I think it's totally possible. I do think also.
Has anyone written
Yeah.
a story about a bachelor party that goes south without any women in it?
Yeah, I'd sign up for that. But I do think horror can be a powerful tool to tell stories about violence against women in a way that is also provides some escapism. I think especially when I think about Such Sharp Teeth, that was an important and difficult book for me to write, but I couldn't have written that book without the werewolf metaphor. It was safe for me to explore the topic of sexual assault through lycanthropy, and through, have that kind of be a cover for me to get into something like deep and emotional. So I think that, and I've been able to thankfully connect with readers who I know feel the same. So I think we can I think something can be really done that's very powerful in the horror genre. We can take violence against women and also give stories that have some escapism, that have some catharsis, that a woman can find her agency through the supernatural and come out the other side. Even, Cackle explores a similar arc. And so I think it can be done, but I also think, like, there has been a shift in the horror genre where it's not just like painful and triggering for women to engage with the genre. I think there's a lot of catharsis in the kind of horror stories that are being told now, and I think that's a really amazing and powerful thing.
Yeah, and and the plus side of using that technique that you were describing is that it also revitalizes these classic horror tropes, vampirism, lycanthropy, because a lot of people I do see, I do read a lot, and I like before we came on air, our producer Xiao Qin pointed out that I love horror, right? And people do get tired of the same treatment of the same tropes over and over again. But when you do something like what you're describing, it actually revitalizes the tropes, and we go, yeah, so this can be a metaphor, and it's a very useful metaphor for discussing all these issues that people don't want to discuss, or maybe people don't want to think about or talk about, but story can bring that. And that leads to our next question, like stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about cultural change, because everything's usually we learn better by listening to stories when it's presented as a story. I mean, even the media, we talk about news stories. And previously, before writing came into being, a writing system came into being, people were passing down stories and histories orally. So let's talk about writing horror stories within the context of violence against women. Can you share some tips and suggestions for portraying female characters in horror who have experienced rape or domestic violence or sexual abuse without reducing them to the sum of their trauma? Because we're asking this question because at least I, as a horror reader, have found that not most writers can't really handle that properly, and we end up with good attempts but not quite there, or they just don't bother at all, and we get re-victimization of the victim and all that. But since you write a lot about, you have a lot of female characters in your books, we're wondering how you handle that, and if you have any tips to share with listeners or viewers who are tuning in to find out more about it.
Yeah, so I think a lot about Rory, who's the protagonist of Such Sharp Teeth, who, I mean, for me, that opening, it's interesting because that book, I went on a bunch of like podcasts that were hosted by very intelligent, lovely guys. And then I went on the She Wore Black podcast, which is hosted by the amazing Agatha Andrews. And she was the first person who was like, I know that initial scene where Rory's attacked by a werewolf, like I picked up on the nuance of the scene where how it mimics the feeling of being sexually assaulted, which was my intention when I wrote the book. And I think, and then there's also her transformation is linked to an experience she had in childhood with sexual violence. And so I think it was important for me to write a character who wasn't like, that wasn't her entire story. And I think it's hard for authors to, like, when they're trying to tell a story about violence, sexual violence, about rape, about domestic violence, it's hard for them, can be hard to see the person living the story instead of just the story itself. And for me, I think what's really important when you're telling the story of a survivor is that's not their whole story. Like, that's a part of their story. And it's important to see the person as who they are and to not like just write them as this is the person and this thing happened to them. I think that does a disservice to them, and I think it does a disservice to all survivors, because you're saying, you're reduced to the worst thing that's happened to you. And so I mean, and there was a really, really painful review in Publishers Weekly for Such Sharp Teeth that was like, the humor in this book is like contradictory to the like more serious topics. And I like burst into tears when I read that because I was like, humor is how I deal with everything. The worst things in my life that have happened to me, I deal with humor. And
Mhm.
it felt very like, again, that person would write a really shitty book about somebody who's survived assault, because
Yeah.
you don't lose your sense of humor when something bad happens to you. And you don't, most people don't lose their sense of humor even on the worst day of their lives. Like, it's so, I think, you know, um, you have to see the character as a full human being and not just their trauma. Um, and I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, it got me thinking what you said because Stephen Graham Jones wrote a book called Mongrels,
Yeah.
and it dealt with, one of the characters is a domestic violence survivor, and the main characters is one of the main characters is a domestic violence survivor, and he does exactly what you said. She's not the sum of her trauma, and wrote a really great book about werewolves, right? But I can't imagine, and there's great humor in that because Steven's one of our Read for Pixels authors as well, and his books, his horror always has humor. But I have to say that I'm observing that he did not get, I don't think he got that sort of feedback on him using humor, whereas you did, and it could very well be sexism because you're female author. So the reviewer just looked at the book like that, whereas he did, he uses the same sort of method, and I don't think he got this sort of pushback. And it's true, we all use humor to deal with. Most of us, anyway, use humor to deal with the the really terrible parts of life. Because if we didn't, I think our mental health would be even
Yeah.
worse. Yeah. So there is a final question from the audience, and then we'll go to our two final questions. So I think you'll laugh at this. So, has Rachel ever thought about writing either a sequel or have characters cross universe in a book? I selfishly want to see Vesper again. And then Xiao Qin, our producer, says, I kind of think Vesper just wants to disappear into humanity. What do you think she goes on to do? My name is Kara. So, what do you think?
Um, I it's in when I finished such sharp teeth, I missed those characters so much and was like, I want to write a sequel. And like I had an idea for a sequel for that book. Um, but sequels are hard because publishers are not too keen. They want the shiny new thing. Um, and sequels tend not to do as well unless it's like a huge fantasy
Is
series.
that that specific to horror? Because you mentioned fantasy, and fantasy always wants at least a trilogy, right?
I think it depends on it depends on how big the book is right out the gate. Um, and Such Sharp Teeth was kind of like it's found its audience over the years. So I don't know. I kind of always hoped it would get adapted and then I could use my idea for the sequel for like season 2 of a show or something.
Yeah.
Um, to me, all of the all of my characters do live in the same universe. Like in my mind, they do. Like there's a Rachel Harrison universe in my in my brain. Um, so I do think, I I hope to continue to grow my catalog, and like I think maybe one day I would like to write like a story collection. People ask me a lot about like Sophie and Sophie's backstory, and um, Black Sheep is currently my only book that's under option. So
Mhm.
fingers crossed, maybe you will see Vesper on a screen
Oh,
somewhere,
yes.
and then her story will be told there.
I really hope your books get adapted because we need to see in horror, we need to see more female friendships, more sisterhood, more. Let's see how two or three women can band together to deal with whatever supernatural horror there is. Because I don't think we get many of those. We got those in Hill House
Yeah.
whenever they adapt it, but we don't really get it elsewhere. I've noticed, or maybe I don't I haven't watched enough horror movies, but
No, I mean, I had a producer tell me earlier this year that Hollywood didn't think that female audiences would show up to a horror movie. So,
wait, are they out of touch? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I think starting from the old in the 1950s and 60s, the horror movies then, and we had the adaptation of different horror books, and we have Ripley and Alien, that's horror
Yeah.
as well, and people turn up, and women are I think the biggest. I've read somewhere that women are the biggest movie going audience.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'll ever understand Hollywood except, put away your sexism, please, and look at the numbers. You
Yes.
say you're so rational, but you're not looking at the numbers. What are you talking about? I would absolutely go watch a movie adaptation of your book, of your
Thank you.
of your book, because I want to see more, more horror movies where there are, two or more female characters dealing, the protagonists who are dealing with the issue, and seeing how they work together to tackle the whole, whatever the big bad is. So I'm gonna put. So we've come to the final couple questions of today, this evening. And let's begin. You have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. So question one would be, why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
I think it's a cause for everyone, and I think it's a very insidious issue that I think most people think of it as something that's kind of cut and dry, or that's very like blatant or obvious. And there's a lot of nuance to domestic violence and violence against women, and it's often quieter than I think people understand. And it's very important that it's not swept under the rug or forgotten about. We live in a world where there's everything moves at such a fast pace, but this issue, I think, is so widespread, and I really think it needs to continue to be in our thoughts, and we need to continue to raise awareness about it, and have people understand the nuances and the signs, and have a deeper understanding of the issue. That wasn't as articulate as I wanted it to be, but
yeah. And also understand how to take action
yes.
about the issue. Understand how to go about helping your family member or your neighbor or your member of your community. And so now the final question of the evening. In your opinion, how can authors like yourself best support efforts to kick off social change to end violence against women?
I think speaking up, supporting organizations such as the Pixel Project, and I also think that in our work, just to make sure that we are being responsible with the characters we write and the situations, and to, if it's being addressed, to make sure that it's being addressed responsibly. But I do think the most important thing that we can do is just lend our voices, so it doesn't get forgotten, to keep talking about it and keep raising awareness.
It's incredible that, a lot of more people are speaking up about it, but there's still so much willful ignorance about it. People just don't want to know. They don't want to talk about it. And it's a constant uphill task to get people to actually listen and take in the information. So I'm going to put myself back on screen. Hi, everybody. If you joined us halfway through the session, this is me, the disembodied voice on screen, talking to Rachel. Thank you all for coming to today's session. Before we sign off, As mentioned earlier, Rachel has generously donated some extremely exclusive goodies to the stash of author gifts that we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page, and also and you know you can go to the fundraising page to check them out. I'm going to put this on screen so you know where to go, everybody. So here we go. Is this sharing? I think it's not sharing. Hang on, everyone. There's a technical issue here. All right, let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. Hold on, everyone. Let me just pull it up separately. All right. Okay. So in the meantime, Xiaoqin or Jay, who are our chat box moderators today, are going to put the link in the chat box so you can click on it and go. Okay. All right. So here we go. Okay, so let's see if this works. Share screen. Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. We're back. Okay, so y'all can go donate for goodies via our Rally Up fundraising page. You can go to the tinyurl.com/R4P Rally Up 2025. This is case sensitive, everybody, so please take this down exactly. And you can find out more about Read for Pixels at bit.ly/Read for Pixels. Again, this is case sensitive. So let me tell you about what Rachel has. What goodies Rachel has donated. So the first one is Rachel's So Thirsty bundle. That's gone. That's the annotated and signed and personalized hardcover copy of So Thirsty, and Rachel has a couple of really cool pieces of cool swag to go with it as well. But there's still 2 other Rachel Harrison goodies left available. The first one is for US donors only, and this is Rachel writing a poem for you. So Rachel will compose and handwrite a poem on the topic of the donor's choice. The topic could be inspired by the donor's own life or one of Rachel's works. She will sign the poem and mail it directly to the donor or the recipient of the donor's choice. So if you know someone who's a huge, if you're not a horror fan yourself and you know someone who's a huge horror fan, please do consider getting it for your friend. And the second goodie that's still available is a 30-minute Zoom call with Rachel. This is available to donors worldwide. Rachel will be happy to chat about the art and craft of writing, publishing, and books with you or your book club or writing group for 30 minutes at a date and time that suits you both. And there are also plenty more author goodies available from authors such as Angela Yuriko Smith, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, Eric Nunnally, Premi Muhammad, and more. And new goodies are released every week throughout September. And we have raised $1,675 towards our $5,000 goal so far. So please give generously before the fundraiser ends in October 2025. All funds go towards our work to end violence against women. And also, if you are in a mood for more horror, you can if you're interested in the intersection between feminist and horror poetry, you might want to get your hands on a copy of our award-winning Under Her Eye poetry collection that is published in partnership with Black Spot Books. You can buy either the paperback or ebook edition from all major booksellers worldwide. The collection of poems includes This collection includes poems by 112 acclaimed female and non-binary poets, including Bram Stoker Awards winner Stephanie M. Vitovich, HWA Lifetime Achievement Award winner and SFPA Grandmaster Marge Simon, and Bram Stoker Awards nominee Jessica McHugh. And the net proceeds from Under Her Eye go towards keeping the Pixel Project's anti-violence against women work alive and kicking. And you can find out more about violence against women and how to help victims worldwide by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. And if you know someone who needs help, you can look for domestic violence and sexual assault helplines and resources in every UN recognized country and territory in the world, and by visiting the nomoredirectory.org. And just a quick reminder that Rachel's new book is out. She read from it this evening. Please, if you don't have a copy, please do get a copy for yourself. Rachel's work is so, so good. Please treat yourself to her newest story. So thank you everyone for being with us today, and have a good day or good night wherever you are in the world.